The room is quiet in a way that feels controlled, almost engineered. At 80, Neil Young sits in a chair that doesn't match the rest of the room. It's older than everything else. The leather is cracked. One armrest is darker where his hand has rested for years. A guitar leans against the wall, not displayed, not polished, used. Always used. Neil Young doesn't move much anymore unless he has to. The body makes the decisions now. There's a stiffness in how he reaches for the instrument, a slight delay between intention and motion. His fingers still find the strings without looking, but they land heavier than they used to. Less precision, more force. The sound is rougher. He doesn't correct it. He plays a few chords, stops, adjusts nothing, then starts again. This isn't rehearsal. There's no upcoming tour schedule taped to the wall. No manager pacing outside. No urgency. The room feels like a place where things are ending slowly, not all at once. There's a stack of notebooks on the floor. Not lyrics exactly. Fragments. Half lines. Lists. Observations written in uneven handwriting. Neil Young looks at one page longer than the others. Then he closes the notebook and sets it aside like he's already decided it won't become anything. That's where things are now. Not dramatic. Just a man measuring what's left. But Neil Young didn't arrive here quietly. His life has always been built on friction, between noise and silence, control and collapse, movement and withdrawal. To understand how he got to this room, you have to start in a different one. Smaller. Less controlled. Neil Young was born on November 12, 1945, in Toronto, Canada. His full name, Neil Percival Young, sounds formal, almost rigid, but the environment he grew up in wasn't stable enough to match it. His father, Scott Young, was a sports writer. His mother, Edna Ragland Young, managed the household, though managed might be too generous a word for what was happening behind closed doors. The family moved frequently. Different cities. Different schools. No consistent ground. Neil Young was a sick child. Polio hit him at 6 years old. Not a mild case. It weakened his left side, left visible damage that never fully corrected. Even later in life, you can see it in how he stands, how he moves across a stage. Slight imbalance. Subtle but constant. Illness isolates a child. Neil Young spent long stretches alone, recovering, observing, not participating. That isolation didn't disappear when the illness did. It stayed. It shaped how he interacted with people. There's a distance in Neil Young that never closes, even in his most personal songs. His parents' marriage collapsed when he was still young. Divorce wasn't clean. It split his environment into fragments. Neil Young moved with his mother to Winnipeg, a place that didn't offer much in terms of opportunity but gave him space. Space matters when you're building something internal. Winnipeg in the late 1950s wasn't a music capital. It was cold, flat, quiet. But Neil Young found sound anyway. He listened obsessively to radio broadcasts. Early rock and roll, country, folk, anything that cut through the static. He didn't learn music in a structured way. No formal training. No disciplined progression. Neil Young picked up instruments the way he approached everything else, by feel. Trial. Error. Repetition. His first bands weren't good. They were loud. Unfocused. Temporary. But there was something in the way Neil Young played that stood out even then. Not technical skill. Not precision. It was the refusal to smooth anything out. If something sounded off, he didn't fix it. He leaned into it. That instinct would define everything later. By the early 1960s, Neil Young was fully committed to music, even though there was no clear path forward. He joined and left multiple bands. The Squires. The Mina Birds. Each project ended the same way. Instability, disagreement, collapse. The Mina Birds were the closest thing to a breakthrough in Canada. They had a record deal with Motown. That mattered. It meant structure. Money, potentially. Exposure. Then it fell apart almost immediately. The band's frontman, Rick James, long before his solo fame, was arrested for draft evasion. The label dropped the group. Contracts dissolved. The opportunity disappeared overnight. Neil Young didn't try to rebuild the band. He didn't look for another structured path in Canada. Instead, he made a decision that looked irrational from the outside. He drove to California. Not with a solid plan. Not with industry connections. Just movement. The idea that something might exist somewhere else. In 1966, Neil Young arrived in Los Angeles. The city was already saturated with musicians trying to become something. Competition wasn't abstract. It was visible on every corner, every club stage, every open mic. For a while, Neil Young existed on the edges. Small gigs. Temporary housing. No real traction. Then he ran into Stephen Stills. They had met before in Canada. The connection wasn't deep, but it was enough. Stills was forming a band. He needed people who could contribute, not just perform. That band became Buffalo Springfield. It wasn't smooth. Nothing about Neil Young's career ever is. The band had multiple strong personalities, conflicting creative directions, and internal tension that never fully settled. But the music cut through anyway. For What It's Worth became a defining track, not because of technical complexity, but because it captured something raw about the time. Social tension, uncertainty, conflict that didn't resolve neatly. Neil Young's role in Buffalo Springfield wasn't dominant, but it was critical. His songwriting started to stand out. Not polished, not predictable. There was a fragmentation in his work that made it feel more real than the cleaner, more structured music around him. But success didn't stabilize the band. It accelerated its breakdown. Arguments over direction, control issues, personal conflicts. By 1968, Buffalo Springfield dissolved. For most artists, that would have been a major setback. A near success that collapsed before it could fully materialize. For Neil Young, it was just another transition. He moved into a solo career almost immediately. The first album didn't land. It wasn't ignored, but it didn't establish him as a major figure either. The production was too controlled, too distant from the raw sound that defined his live performances. Neil Young adjusted. Not strategically, instinctively. Then came Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere. This was different. The sound was heavier, less restrained, more aligned with how Neil Young actually played. Tracks like Cinnamon Girl and Down by the River didn't follow conventional structure. They stretched. They repeated. They built tension without resolving it cleanly. Listeners didn't always know how to categorize it. That worked in Neil Young's favor. Around the same time, he became part of another collaboration. Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. This was a different dynamic. More visibility. More pressure. Larger audiences. The group's performance at Woodstock in 1969 wasn't technically perfect. Neil Young barely engaged with the cameras. He avoided eye contact, focused entirely on the music. It came across as detached, but it was consistent with who he was. Then came After the Gold Rush. Then Harvest. Harvest changed everything. Released in 1972, it wasn't just successful. It was dominant. Commercially, it outperformed everything Neil Young had done before. Songs like Heart of Gold reached audiences far beyond the usual rock base. For the first time, Neil Young wasn't operating on the margins. He was at the center. The irony is that this level of success didn't align with his instincts. Heart of Gold became his biggest hit. It also became something he actively resisted. The song was too clean, too accessible. It didn't represent the full range of what he wanted to do. Most artists would double down on that kind of success. Replicate it, expand it. Neil Young did the opposite. He moved away from it. At the peak of his first major success, Neil Young made a choice that didn't make sense from a commercial standpoint. He started pushing into darker, less accessible material. Albums that felt incomplete. Tracks that sounded unfinished. It wasn't self-sabotage. It was consistency. Neil Young has never been interested in maintaining a stable version of success. Once something becomes predictable, he moves away from it. By the early 1970s, he had everything that defines a peak: recognition, financial security, influence. But none of it settled him. Instead, it created a new kind of pressure. Not external, internal. the need to avoid becoming fixed, to keep shifting, even if it meant losing what he had just gained. That pattern, rise, rejection, reinvention, was already fully formed, and it was about to get more extreme. At the point where most artists would stabilize, repeat the formula, protect the audience they just gained, Neil Young did something that looked almost reckless from the outside. He walked away from clarity. Harvest made Neil Young one of the most recognizable voices in popular music. It also created a version of him that he didn't trust. The clean production, the controlled arrangements, the wide acceptance. It all felt too resolved, too finished. So he started dismantling it. The shift wasn't gradual. It was abrupt. Instead of refining the Harvest sound, Neil Young released material that felt unstable. Time Fades Away came out in 1973, built from live recordings that were intentionally rough. The vocals were strained. The performances felt incomplete. There was no attempt to smooth over mistakes. Critics didn't know how to process it. Audiences were confused. This wasn't the version of Neil Young they had just embraced. Then came On the Beach. Darker, slower, detached. The songs didn't reach outward. They folded inward. Isolation wasn't just a theme. It was embedded in the structure of the music. Long pauses, minimal instrumentation, lyrics that didn't resolve into clear meaning. Neil Young wasn't just experimenting. He was actively rejecting the idea of accessibility. The industry responded predictably. Radio pulled back. Sales dipped. Momentum stalled. But Neil Young didn't correct course. Tonight's the Night followed, and it pushed even further into discomfort. The album was shaped by loss, specifically the deaths of people close to him, including Danny Whitten, a member of Crazy Horse, and roadie Bruce Berry. These weren't abstract tragedies. They were immediate, physical absences. The recordings reflected that. Slurred vocals, off-tempo instrumentation, songs that felt like they were barely holding together. This wasn't a calculated artistic phase. It was documentation of a breakdown, personal and professional at the same time. From a career perspective, this period is often called the Ditch Trilogy. It represents a deliberate move away from commercial viability. For Neil Young, it wasn't a detour. It was alignment. But alignment came with consequences. By the mid-1970s, Neil Young's relationship with the industry had become strained. Labels want predictability. Neil Young refused to provide it. Every time there was a chance to stabilize, he shifted direction again. Zuma brought some structure back. Rust Never Sleeps, in 1979, reconnected him with a broader audience, blending acoustic material with heavier electric tracks. Songs like My, Hey Hey, Out of the Blue carried a kind of self-awareness, acknowledging the risk of fading out versus burning out. But even that resurgence didn't last in a conventional way. The 1980s marked one of the most chaotic periods in Neil Young's career. He signed with Geffen Records, a move that suggested a more stable, commercially focused phase. Instead, it triggered a series of decisions that confused almost everyone involved. Neil Young released Trans in 1982. It leaned heavily into electronic sounds, vocoders, synth-driven tracks. It didn't resemble his earlier work in any obvious way. The reaction was immediate and negative. Fans didn't recognize it. Critics dismissed it. The label didn't understand it. Then came Everybody's Rockin', a rockabilly album that felt like a complete stylistic pivot in the opposite direction. It wasn't just different, it was disjointed from everything that came before it. At this point, David Geffen took legal action. He sued Neil Young, claiming that the artist was deliberately delivering albums that were unrepresentative of his established style. It's a rare situation, an artist being sued not for failing to produce work, but for producing work that doesn't match expectations. Neil Young didn't respond by adjusting his output. He continued shifting. This period is often framed as erratic, but there's a consistent pattern underneath it. Neil Young refuses to be fixed. Any attempt to define him triggers a reaction in the opposite direction. By the late 1980s, something shifted again. Freedom, in 1989, marked a return to form, at least superficially. Stronger songwriting, more coherent production. Tracks like Rockin' in the Free World re-established his relevance in a changing musical landscape. It wasn't nostalgia. It was recalibration. The 1990s extended that resurgence.
Neil Young connected with a new generation of musicians, particularly within the emerging grunge scene. Bands like Pearl Jam saw him as a foundational influence. The collaboration with Pearl Jam on the album Mirror Ball wasn't symbolic. It was functional. Neil Young integrated into their sound without trying to dominate it. This period reframed him, not as a legacy act, but as an active participant in evolving music. Financially, the fluctuations in his career didn't translate into instability. By this point, Neil Young had built substantial wealth. Estimates of his net worth vary, but they consistently place him in the range of hundreds of millions of dollars. Not just from album sales, but from touring, publishing rights, and long-term ownership of his catalog. Unlike many artists, Neil Young maintained a level of control over his work that allowed him to benefit from it over decades.
That control extended into his lifestyle.
Neil Young owns multiple properties, including a large ranch in California. It's not designed for display. It's functional, isolated, space to work without interruption. He's also known for his collection of vintage cars, not as static assets, but as ongoing projects. Neil Young doesn't just collect vehicles. He modifies them, experiments with alternative energy systems, tries to integrate environmental concerns into mechanical design. This isn't a hobby detached from his identity. It's consistent with how he approaches everything. Constant adjustment, resistance to fixed systems. He's owned planes as well. At one point, a 1940s-era Boeing 707 was converted for his use.
Not for luxury in the conventional sense, but for mobility.
Independence from commercial schedules. Control over movement. Wealth, in Neil Young's case, doesn't translate into visible excess.
Translates into autonomy. But autonomy comes with pressure. There's no external structure to push against when you control everything. The responsibility shifts inward.
And that's where the tension builds. Even at the height of his financial success, Neil Young didn't operate like someone comfortable with his position. He continued to release material that challenged his audience. Albums that didn't aim for mass appeal. Projects that seemed intentionally narrow. Streaming became another point of friction. Neil Young has been openly critical of digital audio quality. He launched Pono, a high-resolution audio service designed to provide better sound than standard streaming platforms. It didn't succeed commercially. The market had already settled into convenience over fidelity. Still, the attempt reflects a pattern. Identify a system. Reject its limitations. Build an alternative, even if it fails. Neil Young also took a strong stance on platform control. He removed his music from Spotify over concerns about misinformation associated with the platform. It wasn't a symbolic gesture. It had financial implications. Most artists at his level wouldn't risk that kind of move. Neil Young did it without hesitation. Because the pattern holds. Control matters more than reach. By the 2000s and 2010s, Neil Young's output remained steady, but the context shifted. He wasn't chasing relevance. He was documenting his perspective as it evolved. Health started to play a more visible role. Years of performing, combined with earlier physical issues, began to limit what he could do. The energy required for extended tours became harder to sustain. Recovery times increased. But he didn't stop. Neil Young never fully stops. Even when the scale reduces, the process continues. Writing, recording, adjusting. The contrast between his external success and internal drive becomes sharper over time. He has the resources to step back completely, to settle into a fixed legacy. He doesn't do it, because stopping would mean accepting a final version of himself. And that's the one thing Neil Young has resisted from the beginning. By the time he reaches his late 70s, approaching 80, the question isn't whether he's successful. That's already established. The question is what he does with what's left. Because the pattern, rise, rejection, reinvention, doesn't disappear. It just becomes harder to maintain. And the cost of continuing it gets higher. Loss doesn't arrive all at once in Neil Young's life. It comes in intervals. Long gaps where things seem stable, followed by sudden collapses that leave permanent marks.
The deaths of Danny Whitten and Bruce Berry in the early 1970s weren't abstract tragedies for Neil Young. They were direct consequences of the environment he was part of. Substance abuse wasn't peripheral, it was embedded in the touring structure, the recording sessions, the social circle. Whitten died from a drug overdose. Berry followed the same path. Neil Young didn't distance himself from that reality. He documented it. Tonight's the Night isn't a tribute album in the conventional sense. It's closer to an autopsy. There's no attempt to clean up what happened. The recordings feel unstable because the situation was unstable. That pattern, turning personal damage into output, continues across decades, but the nature of the losses shifts. In 2005, Neil Young suffers a brain aneurysm. It's not gradual, it's sudden. A rupture that forces immediate medical intervention. Surgery follows. Recovery is uncertain. At that stage, he's already an established figure with nothing left to prove, but the body doesn't recognize legacy. It reacts the same way regardless of status. Post-surgery, Neil Young records Prairie Wind. The album is quieter, more reflective, but not in a sentimental way. There's an awareness of physical limitation that wasn't present before. Breathing matters more. Pacing changes. Health becomes a variable that can't be ignored. Then there's his family. Neil Young's son, Ben Young, was born with severe cerebral palsy. His other son, Zeke Young, also has cerebral palsy. This isn't a distant issue in Neil Young's life. It shapes his daily structure, his priorities, and his understanding of control. Caring for children with significant physical disabilities requires consistency, routine, patience. None of the instability that defined his early career works in that environment. Neil Young adapted, but not by changing who he is. He built systems around the reality. He co-founded the Bridge School, creating a space designed specifically for children with severe speech and physical impairments. This isn't a symbolic project. It's functional. It required long-term commitment, funding, and direct involvement. The annual Bridge School benefit concerts became a major part of his life for decades. Not as a side project, but as a central responsibility. Personal relationships also carry weight. Neil Young's marriage to Pegi Young lasted for decades before ending in divorce in 2014. Pegi Young wasn't just a partner. She was deeply involved in the Bridge School and his broader life structure. The separation wasn't public in a dramatic way, but the impact is structural. Long-term systems don't dissolve cleanly. In 2019, Pegi Young dies from cancer. There's no public breakdown from Neil Young. No extended statement. The response is consistent with his pattern. Internalization, followed by output. Grief doesn't appear as a single moment. It diffuses into the work. By the time Neil Young reaches 2026, the accumulation of these events isn't abstract. It's physical. It shows in how he moves, how he speaks, how he structures his days. The version of Neil Young at 80 isn't performing a public persona. There's less separation between the private and the visible. He wakes up early. Not by choice, by habit. Decades of touring, recording, and irregular schedules have trained his body to operate without a fixed pattern. But age simplifies things. Sleep comes in shorter intervals. Mornings start before the sun fully rises. He doesn't rush into activity. Movement is measured. Coffee, usually black. No elaborate routine. The ranch in California remains his primary environment. It's quiet, not silent. There are always background sounds. Wind, distant machinery, occasional vehicles. But there's no external pressure inside that space. Neil Young still writes. Not consistently, not on a fixed schedule. Some days produce nothing. Other days produce fragments that may or may not develop further. He doesn't force completion. The guitar is still central. Acoustic more than electric now. Less strain on the body. Fewer technical demands. The focus shifts from performance to sound itself. Recording still happens, but differently. Smaller setups. Less emphasis on large studio environments. More control, fewer variables. There are still releases, but they don't follow a traditional promotional cycle. No aggressive marketing. No attempt to dominate charts. The work exists because he continues to produce it.
Public appearances are limited. Tours are shorter, less frequent.
Travel requires more planning. Recovery time matters. But he hasn't formally stopped. That's the key distinction. There's no official retirement announcement. No final tour framed as an ending. Neil Young avoids definitive statements like that. Instead, the reduction happens gradually. Fewer shows, longer gaps, smaller outputs. From the outside, it looks like a slow withdrawal. From his perspective, it's adjustment. He's always adjusted. The difference now is that the range of possible adjustments is narrower. The body imposes limits that weren't there before. Energy isn't renewable in the same way. Every decision carries a higher cost. Still, the core pattern remains intact. If something becomes predictable, he shifts. Even now, at 80, Neil Young isn't trying to maintain relevance. He isn't trying to expand his audience. Those phases are over. What remains is the process itself. Writing, playing, recording, adjusting, and evaluating what's left. The idea of a final goodbye doesn't fit neatly into how Neil Young operates. He doesn't close chapters in a clean way. He lets them fade. But there are signs. Not dramatic ones. Subtle shifts. He spends more time reviewing old material. Not for nostalgia, but for assessment. What holds up? What doesn't? What still feels accurate? There's a difference between remembering and re-evaluating. Neil Young leans toward the latter. He also spends more time in silence. Not as a concept, but as a condition. Fewer external inputs. Less noise. More space between actions. Silence isn't empty for him. It's functional. It's where decisions form. The notebooks on the floor. Some get revisited. Others don't. There's less urgency to turn everything into something. That's new. Earlier in his life, incompletion would trigger movement. Now, it's accepted. Not everything needs to resolve. That acceptance might be the closest thing to an ending. Not a full stop. More like a reduction in resistance. He's still there. Still working. Still adjusting. But the scale is smaller. The pace is slower. The output is less frequent. And the distance between what he intends to do and what he actually does is slightly wider than it used to be. That gap is where age operates. There's no dramatic final performance in this version of events. No single moment where Neil Young declares that it's over. Instead, there's a series of smaller decisions. Play today or not. Write this line or leave it unfinished. Record this track or let it stay in the room. Each decision reduces the total output incrementally, until eventually the output stops. Not announced. Not framed. Just absent. That's the trajectory. At 80, Neil Young isn't looking for a final statement that summarizes his life. He's aware that no such statement would be accurate. Too many shifts. Too many contradictions. What remains is the pattern. Move forward. Reject stability. Adjust again. Even when the options narrow. Even when the body resists. Even when the audience expectations no longer matter. The amplifier hums in the background. The guitar rests where he left it. He doesn't rush to pick it up again. He doesn't need to. The work has already been done, and it's still being done in smaller, quieter ways that don't require documentation. So, what do you think about Neil Young's life story and the decisions he made across decades of instability, success, rejection, and control? Let us know in the comments below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. We dive deep into the lives of stars to uncover stories you won't hear anywhere else. Until then, see you.